The king is back. I bought the new Monarch Mark 4s in the kaleidoscope matrix kind of version. It looks very cool. Today we're going to be answering the question of, is the Mark 4 good enough to leave the IEM rabbit hole with? Starting with the overall sound, the Mark 4 has two tuning options. The first one has a balanced, clean, smooth, and slightly airy presentation, a very clean all-rounder sound. The balance switch sounds very detailed, well layered, resolving, and clear, what you would expect at around $1,000. It actually sounds very similar to the Top Pros in the overall tonality. They both follow that clean and balanced sound, with the difference being that the Mark 4 just has a little bit more treble detail, a little bit smoother, and a little bit airier versus the more sparkly and sharper presentation on the Top Pros. In the balance switch, the Mark 4's low end is pretty much identical to the Top Pros, but you also have the option of a more low end centric sound with the bass switch on the Mark 4s, which does give a good amount of quantity and fullness to the low end. You know that some people found the Top Pros to be a little bit thin or a little bit scooped out in the lower mids. Well, the bass switch on the Mark 4s fixes that. So basically, the Mark 4s are a direct upgrade to the Top Pros, same sound, but just more refined with the STs, more smoother in the treble, a tiny bump when it comes to the technical department. Obviously, it's not worth 2 times more technically, but you also do get the extra switch now with the fuller low end. So if you're thinking of buying something in the end game range and you're thinking like whether or not you should save the 500 on the Top Pros or just go for the Mark 4s, personally, if I would just like straight buy it, I would probably get the Mark 4s and just be done with. But value-wise, the Top Pros are much just cheaper. Now, aside from the quantity that you get from the bass boost switch also has a slightly tamer upper mids region, which gives it that like slightly warmer tonality, and it helps it scale better in that configuration. The low end is punchy, it's stumpy, it's well textured, and it has a nice snap to the impact, which still gives you, that slam, the authority, but it also doesn't hinder the separation or the technical performance. Versus the Mark 3s, the Mark 4s are warmer. It's a little bit more mid-bass centric because of the upper mids just like being tamer, shifts the focus more onto the low end, whereas the Mark 3s have a more sub-bass kind of focused sound. The bass notes are slightly tighter and feels ever slightly, like I guess quicker on the Mark 3s, but not as like full and lush sounding versus the Mark 4s. Now, as an all-rounder, the Mark 3s would still be better for most people if you just want to hit shuffle, you don't want to like touch anything with the switches, because it does have the best balance between being bassy but still well extended in the vocals, the treble, whereas the Mark 4s feel more specialized. For example, if you want a cleaner and more neutral listen, the Mark 4s has the balance switch, or if you want something smooth, slightly warmer, then it's also got you covered with the bass boost. So a lot more options depending on what you're looking for. But the thing is, if you're willing to use the switches for different genres, the Mark 4s can specialize better and go deeper, because it can become more neutral or more warm versus just like kind of in between of an all-rounder sound. So in a way, the Mark 4 is actually a better quote-unquote all-rounder, not because one tuning does everything very well, but because the 2 sound profile it does everything better and can specialize a little bit more than a single all-rounder tuning. So in that sense, the Mark 4 ends up becoming more enjoyable with more genres and a quote-unquote better all-rounder in that sense. But aside from that, in terms of bass quality, the Mark 4s doesn't quite have that same reverb feeling, the tactility as the Thieaudio Origin with the bone conduction and the slightly sharper imaging. If it's for pure bass enjoyment and texture, I would still give it over to the Origin. It just sounds a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more contrasty, quote-unquote more unique and bouncy in the texture. But as an all-rounder, the Mark 4s are more technical and smoother in the presentation with more variety on top versus the Origin. With that said, I don't think anyone is going to complain about the bass quality on the Mark 4s because it is already pretty good, and with the bass boost, the quantity and authority is more than enough for most people, with maybe the exception of like really hardcore bass heads. In that case, go for the Titans, go for the HBB Punch, Martellos, those would be better. But for most people, you wouldn't really complain about the bass quality on these. Now, in terms of the vocal and the mid-range compared to the Monarch Mark 2s, which are well known for their clear and beautiful vocal playback, the Mark 4s are not as well extended, as forward, as powerful, as clear, but overall smoother. The Mark 4's vocals are still very good, clear, balanced, slightly airy. They remind me of the original Oracles, so, still very good, but I would still take the Mark 2s over these for vocals alone, because there's just more vocal presence in the overall playback on the Mark IIs because of the extra upper mids boost and the less treble and bass emphasis, which does help with the vocal clarity. I would also take the MYSITC 8, the RS5, and the ARCANIS over the Mark IVs for vocals alone for the same reason, that they're just more vocal centric, you know, trading off some of their low end and the treble to allow the vocals to really become in the focus and have that extra unique factor that makes them stand out from the rest. For example, the MYSITC 8 is brighter and airier with like that sparkly and shine to the vocals. The RS5 is fuller, more powerful, more forward, kind of like getting hit by like a ray of beam. And then the ARCANIS is clean and immersive and has that treble bite to really give the consonants that extra goosebump feeling in the notes. So overall, as an all-rounder, the vocals on the Mark IVs are very good, smooth, balanced, enjoyable. I don't think people are gonna find an issue with the vocals, but I wouldn't say they're top 10 when it comes to vocals for me, because I do think there are better sets out there. Now moving on, for the treble, the Mark IV is very smooth, detailed, slightly airy. Cymbals have the perfect amount of splashiness to them. They're non-fatiguing, refined, not sharp or peaky, and it's what you'd expect at $1,000 with the ESTs. And versus the Prestige LTD, the balance switch on the Mark IVs sounds pretty much the same as my first unit of the LTD, but with like slightly thumpier like bass and low end. Then compared to my second unit of the LTD, the Mark IV in the bass boost switch is now slightly more V-shaped with more sub bass, more treble. So it's kind of hard to say which one, but because they're both kind of different, either way you're gonna get a different version of LTD at the end of the day, which is pretty funny considering this is cheaper and better in the low end. Now tech wise, the Mark IV sit around the same as the Prestige LTDs, which is very good. The only, I guess, main issue is that depending on the unit you get, you might see a bit of a difference, but overall technical performance is fairly similar, same as the DUNU GLACIER as well. So on that same range, pretty technical, you know, for the price. And I would say this is a slight bump over the Mark IIIs and the Mark IIs in terms of pure detail retrieval, like refinement, smoothness. It's a slight bump. It's not a huge difference. Like if you already have those two, like I wouldn't recommend just buying this to upgrade for the tech alone. Like they're very close, just slightly better, right? They also just improved the build quality on these as well. It's all metal now, and the packaging is slightly better. One nitpick I do have is that the case is, it's like what is this? This is a cardboard. Like this is already kind of scuffed, and I had these for like a few days. So the case is definitely a disappointment, I would say, because it's very flimsy for what you're getting. It's literally just it's literally hard cardboard. But aside from that, is this a technical value monster? No. Like after 1K, you're not gonna really find like much of those. The Top Pro is pretty close to this, but like this is obviously a little bit better. But yeah, value wise, it's competitive, but not crazy. I would say though, if you are eyeing these versus the Prestige, I would get these because you pretty much get both of the tuning of the Prestige LTDs. You get the older one and then the newer one, like slightly more fun version of the newer one as well. So definitely these over the Prestige LTDs. Now genre wise, the Mark IV plays back everything in an all-rounder way, not because it's the best all-rounder tuning, but because it's got two tuning options that covers pretty much the entire spectrum. For example, when it comes to indie, ballads, acoustic, classical, the balance switch sounds perfect on those with its cleaner tonality. Separation works very well on those genres. And then for more like low and heavy stuff, or like genres that can use less energy like rock, metal, R&B, pop, the bass switch got you covered on that with its extra warmness in the mid bass and a smoother tonality in the upper mids and treble. These also sound pretty smooth with K-pop and J-pop at mid volume because of the upper mids cut and the smoother playback in the treble with the ESTs. Scaling wise, I would say these are pretty good. It gets pretty up there depending on the switch you use and the genre. For example, with the bass switch, we're looking at around 75 to 80 to 85 dBs even, depending on the track. And then with the balance switch, we're looking at around like 65, 75 on cleaner stuff, and maybe like 65 to 70 on K-pop, J-pop. So scaling wise, these are pretty good, but I wouldn't say they're a full explorer kind of level. You're not going past 85 dBs on these, but gets the job done. Then tip wise, I like the Software Ultra Clears the best because they just fit me the best. However, if you need more low end, the Velvet's the Venus regular or wide works as well. The Final E's work as well, you know, if you want more scaling. Senkai's would get the job done as well, or even the Tri Clearance for more treble energy. Basically any tips work on these because the IM itself is refined enough, so just like play around with it, have fun with it. But for the fit, these are a pretty chunky boy. They're around the same size as the original Monarchs, so if you have issues fitting the OG Monarchs, you're gonna have a little bit of issue with the, I guess it's like it's not too thick, but but it is slightly on the thicker side. Now as for some other comparisons versus my recent version of the DUNU GLACIER, which is also an all-rounder, the GLACIER pops out a little bit more when it comes to the vocals. It has a little bit more sub-bass rumble. It's more sub-bass focused than mid-bass. It's less airy, less splashy, more clear, like more contrasty, slightly sharper. If you prioritize the vocals, you like them to be a little bit more forward or clearer, but you still want an all-rounder sound with like good bass, good treble as well, then in that case the GLACIERs would be the better pick for that, because it does work a little bit better with the vocals standing out, popping out a little bit more. But it does get a little bit shouty and peaky sometimes with like hip-hop, K-pop, J-pop because of the extra upper mids boost. So it's better for more slower genres and less smooth in general, whereas the Mark IVs would be just, I guess, a safer pick when it comes to vocals, but you also do get the tuning options as well. In my opinion, I would go for the Mark IVs because I think they're more versatile and also cheaper, but GLACIER is also an option if you want an all-rounder with like more forward vocals. Then lastly, as for some upgrades, if you're coming from the MK5 ESC7, the VOLARE, Super MX4, the CHOPIN, you know, like an all-rounder kind of sound, then the Monarch Mark IV with the balance switch would be the direct upgrade to those. It has a similar airy smooth playback as the VOLARE and the MK5-7, but just a little bit more detail in the treble, a little bit more better bass texture, and the option for a more warmer tonality with the bass switch. Now, should you blind upgrade to them if you already have the VOLARE or the MK5-7? Probably not, because tech-wise they're already pretty close. Like if we're talking about value, the MK5, the VOLARE, the Top Pro would all be better. They're like half the price, very similar. But you know, Mark IV are technically a little bit better with more variety as well. So the option is there if you do want to upgrade. Personally, I wouldn't upgrade just for the technicalities. If you value the tuning and the switch, bass switch, then that's would be like a better, I guess, incentive to upgrade. So then to answer the initial question of can you leave the hobby with the Mark IVs? Yes, these are an amazing all-rounder set that have great technical performance and treble refinement to back it up, and I would definitely recommend them as an quote-unquote endgame for the vast majority of people watching. Now obviously there are slightly better IEMs if you're hunting for semi-fi, but those are going to be a lot more expensive. Huge astronomical diminishing returns. I wouldn't recommend any of those to anyone unless you have a lot of spare cash lying around. And the thing is, you can also leave the hobby with the ARCANIS, which is 3 times cheaper on sale, you know, or the Odysseys under $200 on sale, or the Explorer under $100 on sale. The thing is, as long as you find that one set that resonates to you and your library, it makes you enjoy the music, then the rest really doesn't matter too much. It's just sci-fi noise at that point. So please don't go sell your kidneys or like go into debt for these. Let's just enjoy the music and be happy with what we have. But with that said, Thieaudio has delivered with the Monarchs. Is this the king? Maybe, maybe not, doesn't really matter, but these are a very solid option at $1,000. And yeah, stay tuned for the Prestige Mark II whenever that comes out, and I hope this review was helpful. Giveaway is still ongoing. Good luck to everyone in that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everyone in the next one.
Shout out to Dom Q, Rark's Cat, Mystic Spoon, Attack, B Urak, Discal Scaldus, Walker Standard, Patrick, User, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Mr. Gorillas, Polly J, Giseng Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Wizard, Obi, Treble Well Extended, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapis Art, Choco Norse, Tamat, Shen Bakale, FKSRG, Cousin Fat Fat, Julius, Dead Riddle, Belha, Ardmore, Nico, Parham, Nicholas, Brandon, Addy, Circle Gaming, Harder to Play, Wayu, Michael, Jacob, Denier, Vinicius, Trackstar, Andy, LL, Sammy, Funtimes, Sherjib, Peter, and Someone Help Me. Thank you guys so much for the support.